What's up guys, Miles Away here. Hope everybody's doing well. It's summer here, it's so hot outside, but what better way to spend the nice weather than reviewing synths and talking about gear. I've gotten a lot of requests to compare different synths and to see which ones do which things well and which ones not so much. So that's exactly what we're gonna do today. It's gonna be a super nerdy video and I hope everybody enjoys it. Give me a thumbs up if you like this content. Remember to subscribe and turn on the bell and let's get started. All right, so what I'm going to attempt to do here is a very unscientific comparison of these two instruments to just kind of see like what their unique sounds are and what they each bring to the table. So to start off with, let's fire up an init patch on both. So we've got one here. It's just a basic saw wave, and likewise here we've got one basic saw wave. So right off the bat, we can tell there's differences in the oscillators. For me, the Prologue's oscillators sound a lot more full and rich by themselves than the Summits do. And it's immediately noticeable when you start to play octaves. It just sounds a lot brighter and fuller on the Prologue. Where we get into some interesting territory though is if we use the oscillator diverge and drift. This way we can start to get a bit more analog and a bit more full sounding. Let's bring in a second oscillator. See, right there, once we bring in a second oscillator on the Summit with these different settings enabled, I have right now 36 oscillator diverge and 8 oscillator drift. Then it starts to sound a lot better and a lot more analog. All right, cool. So for our first sound, we're going to make a big saw pad. Detune a little bit. All right, next up, we're going to use the filter. The Summit has an amazing filter. As does the Prologue. So the Prologue has what's called a 12 dB per octave filter. And what that is going to be a much kind of gentler filter that allows a lot more of the high end in. Really an amazing filter here, but it's very much, this is what you get. There's only one filter. Whereas on the Summit, we have this nice dark filter, but we also have 12 dB. You can get a lot closer. So filters at 50%. It can sound almost the same. So now we're really starting to get into even territory, in my opinion, between the two instruments. The Prologue still does have this bite that I just really love, and I think it's from the filter. I'm not too sure, but it's very hard to replicate on any instrument. Let's start playing with resonance. Prologue's got that famous MS-20 style filter with its distortion. Now here, I actually start to prefer the Summit, believe it or not. The Prologue has very characteristic resonance where it's going to always sound just a little bit distorted, which is very cool for basses. But the Summit's got that classic, almost Oberheim-y, brassy texture. Again with the 24 versus the Prologue. I find for the Prologue, it's most beautiful sounding with about 30% resonance. As soon as you start bringing it up, it's still nice, but it's much more distorted. Both really amazing filters, but here I'd actually give it to the Summit. I like the Summit's filter a little bit more than the Prologue. All right, so we're gonna move on to the envelopes and the decay and the reverb and just see how we can make these pads sound by basically doing the same thing twice. Summit is just amazing for pads. They both sound honestly phenomenal in my opinion. I wouldn't really know which one I preferred. The Summit definitely has a more modern sound. It's definitely a little bit sharper, but it's at the same time got that amazing creamy filter, whereas the Prologue sounds very dark and very analog. Awesome. Final step with this sound, we're going to add in effects, and we're going to see how those sound on each respectively. So on the Prologue, we've got a great selection of choruses and ensembles. Just a little bit of light chorus. And then the reverb on this thing, we already went over in the last review, but it's amazing. There's our sound. So for comparison, to me, the Summit's chorus is so good, you could never tell it's not analog. And did I mention the reverb? Beautiful sounds. I think I've got the filter a little bit more here. All right, so let me know which one you guys preferred from those two pads. So that's going to be sound one. All right, so for sound number 2, we're going to compare square waves, pulse width modulation, and all that good stuff. So starting off, this is what the square wave sounds like. That's the Prologue, and that is the Summit. So they sound very similar this time. I think there's less of a difference between the square waves and the saw waves on these instruments. Here, the Summit is a little bit brighter, whereas the last time the Prologue was brighter. Now let's add in some pulse width. I love pulse width, so nice. Awesome, good stuff. So bringing in a LFO to modulate the shape. Let's do that. So all of a sudden now I'm actually really preferring the Prologue. I think that it just sounds a little bit more real and natural when I'm doing this type of modulation because each of the VCOs is behaving a little bit differently. But let's see if we can change that with the oscillator divergent drift. Nice, we're not getting too far off there. I still think there's just a little bit more weight, a little bit more heft. But it's very close. You'd never be able to tell the difference in a mix. Awesome, let's grab a filter and let's start making some plucks. For this one, I'm going to use a 24 dB filter because I prefer that for pluck sounds. Listen to that filter. That's an amazing filter. You just can't get the same type of tones between you just can't get the same type of tones on a 12 dB filter as you can with a 24. Let's bring in the 12. Just really, really great sounds on both these instruments. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to add in some distortion on both to see what the difference makes there. So here we've got the Prologue. We're going to add in some distortion. 50%. 100%. The distortion really thickens the low end and cuts out the high frequencies on the Prologue, which I don't love, but you can get past that with using a little bit of high pass. All right, now on the Summit, we've got a really awesome set of distortions. So we're going to start with the overdrive. Listen to that crispy analog distortion. Full distortion. Just completely different distortion models here, right? Like you can't even compare them at a certain point. If we open the filters, let's see what it sounds like. To me, the clear winner there is the Summit for its distortion. It's some of the coolest sounding distortion I've heard, and we haven't even gotten to the actual distortion section. This is really just the overdrive. So let's swap out the overdrive and replace it with a distortion circuit. So crunchy. All right, now the Prologue does have one trick up its sleeve for distortion, which is user effects. So here I'm using the Amp It plugin from Dirtbox Synth. And what we're going to do here, we're going to modify its parameters. And this is a really awesome little distortion plugin. Listen how crunchy that is. It's completely different than the sound we started with, but almost sounds like an old Electro House sound. But you will never get the power of this analog distortion here. But yeah, that's a good comparison of those two. All right, so for the third sound here, what I'm just going to try to do is make a Moog style bass on each of the synths and just see what we need to do to get that classic Moog bass sound, just to show you guys how each of these synths can compare for synth bass. And I think the results might surprise you, so check this out. We're going to start with a couple of saw waves, detune them a bit. Listen to that natural beating, so cool. All right, and then what we're gonna do, an octave below, we're gonna put a square. That's thick for sure. Let's do the same thing on the Summit. Awesome. They both sound really thick, really fat. One bonus tip that the Prologue can do to create that sub-oscillator layer, instead of actually using the multi-engine, which I think might even sound better, is if we use the voice mode depth to create sub-frequencies. Sounds like this. Yeah, to me that sounds way better than using the multi-engine. There's just something about the VCOs that you can't beat them. The multi-engine's great for creative stuff, but for power, you can't beat 16 VCOs playing at the same time. But the Summit's got a trick up its sleeve here. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take that tasty overdrive from before and just feed it in slowly. Awesome sound. So let me know which one you guys like better just from that. To me, they sound both fantastic, and you would never guess that the Summit is not analog oscillators based on how thick that sounds. Awesome. Now let's bring in the filters. We're going to take envelope mode off of legato. Mess with the envelope a bit. Awesome Moog bass. Let's do the same thing. Now here's where the Summit's 24 dB filter is really going to have an advantage over the Prologue. There, were you guys expecting that? In my opinion, Summit absolutely destroys the Prologue when it comes to bass sounds. It just doesn't even come close, and that is mainly because of the filter. So for me, the types of bass sounds I like to make almost always use a 24 dB low pass filter just to cut out all those high frequencies and allow for really clean, clicky filter envelope bass sounds. Now, you could use some FM sounds and tricks to get that click more and then cut out more of the frequency with the filter. But for me, for a classic analog bass sound, the Summit is second only to a Moog. All right, so finally here, I'm just going to end the video by doing more or less a comparison on just a bunch of cool features that each of the synths has that the other one doesn't. So you guys can kind of get an idea of, where each of them has its strengths outside of traditional analog sounds like we've been looking at. So right off the bat, we're going to have to open the multi-engine here because this thing is really, the star of the show when it comes to sound design. So you've got all your different kind of main sounds that it comes with. This air one is a particular favorite of mine. If we take the just gorgeous tones right off the bat. But so where this gets really cool is with the user oscillators. We covered this in the review, so go check that out if you haven't watched that already, but I'll go through a couple of my favorites. So firstly, shout out to Tim Shoebridge for his Octaves oscillator. I bought this a while back and it's really cool. So this is just one oscillator. We can already mix in if we want more analog sounds, analog oscillators. Amazing stuff. Another great sound design tool I love here with the Prologue is using its delay engine as a looper to create amazing pad drones for infinity. These are great for the back of your songs as atmosphere. Really cool. You can see how you get distracted by this for a long time. But now on to the Summit. So the Summit has a lot of things to its advantage as well that I really do miss when I go back to the Prologue. So for one, right off the bat, we've got FM on the front panel, which is really great for those DX style bells and sounds. what I really love about the Summit is, whereas we use the delay to create loops with the Prologue, with the Summit, the reverb almost is an instant pad generator. Just gorgeous, right? If we combine the two, we can get some really awesome sounds. Not bad, right? I guess the way to end this video, even though it was a comparison, is for me to say I wouldn't know which one to pick, honestly. They're both such incredible instruments, and we just touched the surface of what these two synths can do. I think when it comes down to it, I love the Summit for pads and lush tracks, lush sounds, and the Korg I love for traditional analog sounds like keys, plucks that sound like they're from Stranger Things, and saw chords. You know, they both do everything so well. It's really amazing to be able to use both, and I would say if you are on the fence of getting either one of these, you won't regret it. Alright guys, so that brings the video to a close. Hope everybody enjoyed that. I really do think that they're two of the greatest synths, and we live in a really great golden age of excellent instruments available nowadays to choose from. So let me know if you guys like this kind of content and what you want to see next. Please remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in the next video.